As the Jedi and Sith understood it, the Force was divided between the light and the dark side, with there being little room between these two extremes. However, as we've explored in past videos, other Force groups such as the aing-tii monks saw the Force more like a rainbow, with many different variations and varieties. The so-called Grey Jedi also viewed the Force in a different way to the Jedi or Sith, believing that it was possible to follow the light as well as the dark. What's more, the beliefs of different Grey Jedi orders were very varied. While these groups did not adhere strictly to the Jedi or Sith teachings, the variation between the different Grey Jedi groups was almost as extreme as the opposing views of the Jedi and Sith. This video will briefly explore the various groups that followed the middle path, and how they differed from both the Jedi and Sith as well as one another. A common theme between many of the Grey Jedi groups is their devotion to some kind of utopian ideal or greater good. Like the Sith, they were often willing to allow innocents to die to achieve their goals, but like the Jedi, would also be willing to lay down their own lives for their higher purpose. This was certainly the case for the first group we will discuss today, known as the Imperial Knights. The Imperial Knights were an organisation that existed around 100 years after the events of the Galactic Civil War. The Imperial Knights served the Fel Empire, the successor state of the Imperial Remnant in the Legends timeline. However, unlike the Empire under Palpatine, the Fel Empire rejected the dark side, believing it to be a corrupting influence. However, they also rejected the Jedi's interpretation of the will of the Force, maintaining the belief of centralized power, monarchy, and above all, stability. The Imperial Knights were the elite fighting forces of the Empire, serving the Fel Emperor rather than the Force itself as the Jedi did. They believed that the will of the Force was served through the will of the Emperor, as he was the embodiment of order, the greater good, and therefore the Force. However, there were some caveats to this. If the Fel Emperor was to fall to the dark side, it was their duty to bring him back to the light or remove him from power. As previously stated though, this interpretation of the light side of the Force was very different to the Jedi, who described them as a Grey Order. Unlike the Jedi, the Imperial Knights believed the loss of innocent lives was sometimes necessary to achieve their goals. However, this was never to be done in the pursuit of selfish desires, only if the Fel Emperor's orders required it. It was this strict adherence to orders and a code of honour that prevented them from falling completely to the dark side. They did not contemplate on the will of the Force or their own selfish desires. The Force was simply a tool to be used in service of their Emperor. While they did not draw upon dark side abilities, they were also not considered adherents to the light side, as they did not follow the will of the Force, placing them firmly in the grey. Another similar order of Grey Jedi that served an authoritarian government were the Mandalorian Knights. Like the Imperial Knights, they believed the will of the Force was not served well by democracy, which they saw as corrupt and irredeemable. The Mandalorian Knights fought for Mandalore the Ultimate against the Republic, almost 4,000 years before the events of the Clone Wars. These knights were led by Dorjanda Case, a Jedi Master who had once sat on the Jedi High Council. Dorjanda Case had lost his wife and unborn child in a Republic bombing, with this tragic experience souring his view of the Jedi and democracy. He came to believe that the Republic was corrupt beyond redemption, and that a Mandalorian victory was inevitable. He believed that the Mandalorian philosophy of order, honour, and self-sacrifice for the greater good of the Mandalorian people was more in tune to the Force than the self-serving elite in the Galactic Senate. However, this view also meant embracing the authority of Mandalore the Ultimate, and turning a blind eye to the various atrocities that the Mandalorians were committing. In this way, the Mandalorian Knights were similar to the Imperial Knights of the Fel Empire, embracing authoritarianism over democracy, believing this was more closely aligned to the will of the Force and a better way of achieving stability in the galaxy. As with many utopian idealists, Dorjanda Case was soon confronted by the contradictions of his own ideology. He was forced to choose between surrendering to the Jedi or kill for his beliefs. However, when he found out his hostage was pregnant, he was reminded of his late wife and surrendered himself to the Republic, with him and the rest of the Mandalorian Knights later going on trial in the Galactic Senate. And this demonstrates one of the key issues with being a Grey Jedi. Those who believe that the loss of life is sometimes justified in the name of the greater good often are confronted with these very situations, just as Dorjanda Case was. Either they decide that their beliefs are worth killing innocents for, pushing them further to the dark side, or they choose not to, showing them the hypocrisy of their beliefs and leading them back to the light. The path of a Grey Jedi was certainly a hard one. Without utter devotion to the cause and a strong will, the pull towards the light or the dark was inevitable, and this is most likely why they were so rare. However, there were other orders that did manage to follow the Grey path, without the need of an authoritarian ruler telling them what they had to do for the so-called greater good. This was usually done through a strong moral philosophy that differed from both the Jedi and the Sith. One notable example of this were the Potentium. They believed that there was no such thing as the light or dark side, as the Force itself was inherently good. In their opinion, there was no dark side, as this was simply the corruption of the Force by the evil that resided within all sentient life. Therefore, it was not the abilities used by the Sith that made them evil, it was the intent with which they were used. They reasoned that by becoming perfectly moral, they could use and study whatever Force technique they desired, without being corrupted. The Potentium would be expelled by the Jedi Order just over 100 years before the Clone Wars, with many Jedi believing their philosophy to be concocted by the Sith to undermine their teachings. The Jedi argued it was the duty of Force users to protect others, not study its absolute limits. In their eyes, the Potentium's desire to unlock all the abilities of the Force was dangerously close to the Sith's own goal of achieving unlimited power. They concluded that there was no way to use hate-fueled techniques like Force lightning without falling for its temptation. Grey Jedi such as the Potentium rejected this as nonsensical, believing that the best way to bring peace to the galaxy and protect innocents was to use some aspects of the dark side. Despite their disagreements, the Jedi allowed them to exist, with Master Yoda not considering them Dark Jedi due to their quest for perfect morality. While the Jedi only mildly disagreed with the Potentium, other Grey Jedi groups strayed closer to the dark side, with the Jedi being militantly opposed to them. The best examples of this were the Gensari. Rather than rejecting Sith and Jedi ideology, as other Grey Orders did, this group drew heavily from both orders, attempting to combine their teachings. This group was a splinter group of the Jedi, and was formed by Nikos Tiris. Tiris had discovered an old Sith manuscript detailing Laud Noon's philosophical thoughts, the history of the Sith, and their war with the Jedi. However, this information was highly misleading. While most of the book was correct in its teachings, it claimed one vital detail that was factually incorrect: that the Jedi had gained their power by stealing it from the Sith. While this was untrue, Tiris remained convinced of its authenticity, turning his back on the Jedi Order and taking his followers with him. He named the group the Gensari, meaning the hidden followers of the truth in ancient Sith. However, around the same time, the Sith were revealed once again to the Jedi. Anxious of any deviation into the dark side, the Jedi attacked the Gensari, killing Nikos Tiris. However, unbeknownst to the Jedi, some would survive, and they soon fled into hiding. They grew to hate the Jedi Order, and rejoiced after Order 66. However, the Empire would view them as a threat, with Palpatine dispatching Vader to hunt them down. The Gensari would yet again go into exile, perfecting their techniques and maintaining their customs. After the fall of the Empire, the Gensari would come out of hiding, and maintain friendly relations with Luke Skywalker's newly established Jedi Order, even sending representatives to learn from the Jedi as well as teach them their ways. The Gensari's philosophy was an incomplete one at best, largely due to the flawed teachings their founder had received. This meant that the Gensari's teachings changed greatly over time, initially focusing more heavily on their limited understanding of the dark side, before returning to the light. One part of their culture that remained constant was their fearsome Sith-inspired battle armor. While the Jedi focused more upon the construction of their lightsabers, the Gensari considered the construction of their armor as much more important. This armor was deeply personal and could be customized however the individual saw fit. It was also a tradition to base the armor upon a terrifying animal that was not overly aggressive, such as the Corellian Sand Panther, reflecting their Grey Jedi philosophy. Another order that strayed close to the dark side but were technically a Grey Jedi organization were the Knights of Zakuul, of the Eternal Empire. The Knights of Zakuul can trace their origins from the tribal Force-sensitive leaders of Zakuul. However, after the Sith Lord Vitiate took over the mind of Valkorion and formed the Eternal Empire, those Force-sensitives bent their will to their new Emperor. The Knights were unlike the Sith or Jedi, and did not rigidly adhere to one side of the Force. The Knights were encouraged to explore their connection to the Force as they saw fit, and pursue greater knowledge. While the Order sought unlimited power, just like the Sith, this knowledge was to be shared with other members and of course their Emperor. Under the leadership of Valkorion and later his son Archon, the Knights of Zakuul and the Eternal Fleet wreaked havoc upon the galaxy, turning the Sith Empire and the Republic into tributary states. However, after the defeat of the Eternal Empire, the Order would fade into obscurity, later to be forgotten almost entirely. The next order on this list is the Sorcerers of Tund, a secretive and ancient order that sought to combine science, Sith magic, and their understanding of the Force. The Sorcerers were extremely proficient in the use of Force illusions, so skilled in fact that many outsiders believed them to be shapeshifters. The Sorcerers of Tund trace their origins back to the Ancient Sith. The Ancient Sith were a barbaric dark-side wielding people, but were arguably far less ingrained in the dark side than they would later become. For example, King Adas, the first Sithari, would sacrifice himself for his people in a bid to drive the Rakata from the Sith homeworld, an act of selflessness that would rarely be seen in the later Sith empires. This Rakatan invasion had a profound effect on the Sith, introducing the idea of extreme selfishness and the suppression of compassion. This invasion would also affect a number of Sith priests, who came to believe that the Force spanned the cosmos while also rejecting the idea of the dark and the light side. For these beliefs, they were rejected by the increasingly indulgent and immoral Sith, going into exile on the planet of Tund. The Order thrived on this planet, soon attracting other species to its ranks. They would eventually become known to the Jedi, who attempted to convince them to give up their dark side magic and join the Jedi. Although the Jedi were unsuccessful in their mission, they would continue to keep a watchful eye on them, making sure they did not descend further into the dark side. The Sorcerers of Tund would survive Order 66, with Palpatine showing an uncharacteristic display of compassion by allowing them to exist, provided they never left their homeworld. Sadly, the Sorcerers would eventually be destroyed by one of their own. A sorcerer named Rokor Gepta learned all he could from the group before destroying all life on the planet with an electromagnetic torpedo, eradicating the Order from existence. Another Grey Order that has its roots in the Sith were the Order of Revan. Also known as the Revanites, this order was not opposed to the Sith. They simply wanted to reform their empire from the inside. They viewed Darth Revan as the perfect being, and the embodiment of balance between the light and the dark side. Formed by the Sith, known as Tari Darkspanner, the Order would accept anyone into its ranks, just as Revan had accepted anyone as his companion. The Order soon numbered in the hundreds, and came to incorrectly believe that the Sith Emperor was secretly Darth Revan himself. These heretical beliefs soon came under the scrutiny of the Dark Council, and they fled into the jungle. After 300 years of torture by the Sith Emperor, Darth Revan returned, taking control of the Revanites. Taking advantage of the wide variety of members, the Revanites sought to bring down both the Republic and the Sith, using an ancient Rakatan droid factory known as the Foundry. However, Revan and his Revan Knights would eventually be defeated on Yavin 4 by a coalition of Republic and Sith forces, leaving the Order leaderless and with no direction. The Order fled and was never seen again, presumed to be disbanded. Next, we have the Witches of Dathomir. Many falsely believe that the Witches of Dathomir were a dark side group. However, this is not the case, with many fans simply conflating the Witches of Dathomir with the Night Sisters. The Witches of Dathomir were formed around 600 years before the Clone Wars by an exiled Jedi known as Ulya. When Ulya arrived on Dathomir, it was almost completely untamed and uncivilized. Some believed they had been cut off from the wider galaxy around 2.5 millennia before, while others believe it was used as a penal colony at some point. Regardless of how they got there, the inhabitants of this planet were very primitive. Although the Dathomiri had a long history of Force-based shamanic practices dating back to the days of the Rakatan Empire, by this point it was pretty much lost to them. Much of the population were terrorized and preyed upon by the dominant species on the planet, the Rancors. Ulya set in motion a dramatic change in Dathomiri society. She trained the females how to use the Force and taught them how to tame the Rancors. She also enslaved all the men on the world, either feeding them to Rancors or using them as labourers. The most able-bodied men were selected to become mates for the Dathomiri witches, but other than that, the two sexes would have little contact. As well as creating this rather oppressive society, she also authored the Book of Law, which warned witches against using powers for evil. It read as follows: Daughters of Ulya, learn these words and learn them well, for they are the foundations that will increase your strength and keep you safe from harm. Those who suffer emotion will never enjoy peace. Those who choose ignorance will never know their greatness. Those who yield to passion will fail to dominate. Those who fear death will never achieve pure power. Never forget that your magic must be used wisely. Never concede to evil, lest you be consumed by it. Those who didn't follow this strict code and experimented with dark side magic were exiled into the jungles to be purified. Although most would return, some did not. These dark side witches would eventually band together to form the clan that would later become known as the Night Sisters. After Ulya's death, the Witches of Dathomir would split into various clans. Some would go on to use off-worlder technology to explore the stars, but most would remain on Dathomir. Their use of the Force was poorly understood, even by the Jedi, as it often seemed as though they were casting spells rather than using Force abilities. This magic primarily came in the form of spirit ichors, the green smoke-like substance we see used multiple times in the Clone Wars TV show. This was created by channeling the winged goddess, the literal embodiment of the light side of the Force. The Night Sisters soon became the dominant clan on the planet, but many were wiped out by Grievous during the Clone Wars. Despite this, some Witches of Dathomir and Night Sisters remained, and in Legends they joined the New Republic soon after its creation, although they largely remained neutral and isolated. The next order on this list were the precursors to the Jedi, and to a lesser extent the Sith Order as well. These were of course the Jedi Order. The Jedi sought true balance in the Force. In fact, if they did not maintain balance, the planet Tython would react violently with storms and earthquakes. The Jedi were composed of many different species, including Twi'leks, Wookiees, humans, and even Sith. They had all been brought to Tython aboard mysterious ships known as the Tho-Yor, over 35,000 years before the Clone Wars. The Jedi recognized that there was light in the darkness and darkness in the light, maintaining the belief that it was impossible to ever be free of either. To instill this belief in their followers, they developed the Jedi Code, that would later be adopted and altered by both the Sith and the Jedi. The code read as follows: There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no fear, there is power. I am the heart of the Force, I am the revealing fire of light. I am the mystery of darkness. In balance with chaos and harmony, immortal is the Force. After lasting for over 10,000 years, the Jedi were invaded by the Rakata. Although they repelled these invaders, they left lasting scars on the Order, with the Jedi soon falling into civil war between the followers of the light and the dark. The followers of the light would emerge victorious, but their homeworld was now ruined. They reformed themselves into the Jedi Order, rejecting their previous teachings of the dark side. The remaining Dark Jedi would flee into the Outer Rim, never to be seen again. However, the Jedi did not have the galactic reach that they would later have. The Jedi were by no means the only followers of the Force, and there were many other sects that worshipped the Force in a different way, with some, such as the Dai Bendu monks, incorporating emotion into their teachings, with some also considering them a grey organisation. Others focused upon more practical aspects of the living Force, learning how to drastically increase crop yields and how to heal others. Some groups also studied midichlorians and the secrets of immortality, which of course the Jedi Order deeply frowned upon. One such group were known as the Followers of Palawa, and arose in order to keep the Jedi Order in check after their home planet was destroyed in a war somehow involving the Jedi High Council, although the details of this are lost to history. This order developed a highly effective martial art known as Teras Kasai, specifically designed to combat Jedi. They also developed a meditative technique that could halt aging. Unfortunately, not much is known about these grey organisations. However, we know much more about the organisation that would bind together many of the members of these groups, as well as many of the ancient Jedi. The Force practices of these groups garnered the attention of a respected Jedi Knight known as Zendor, who was highly questioning of the Jedi High Council's increasingly singular view of the Force. He desired to learn from these other sects and learn their Force techniques, so that the Jedi could better serve the Force and the people of the galaxy. However, when he asked the Jedi if he could open an academy to study these sometimes darker aspects of the Force, he was unanimously rejected. Zendor quietly left the Order, settling on the world of Leto to start his academy without the blessing of the Jedi. This new academy caused great excitement within the Jedi Order and the other Force-wielding orders, and soon many would join Zendor in his quest to understand all aspects of the Force. Zendor's followers named themselves the Legions of Leto, and he would take on many of the traditions practiced by the ancient Jedi. However, the Jedi High Council viewed them as heretics, and would grow resentful as a large portion of their order left to join Zendor on Leto. The Jedi amassed an army to try and force the Legions of Leto to bend to their will. However, Zendor's followers would also militarize, and soon the two armies clashed. Who struck first has been lost to history, but in an attempt to prevent civilian bloodshed, Zendor confronted the Jedi on their fortress world of Ossus. The Jedi soon pushed the Legions of Leto away from Ossus, pushing them back towards the civilized worlds of the core, in an attempt to draw the Republic to their side. Zendor would inform the Republic of the Jedi High Council's treachery, but they instead sided with the Jedi, branding Zendor as a warlord. The war would spill over into the Republic, and even Coruscant itself saw its fair share of the fighting. Eventually, Zendor was slain in battle, and his academy was sacked by the armies of the Jedi. His followers were then hunted down and brutally murdered. Ironically, the Jedi were so fearful of Zendor's small deviation into the dark side, they were willing to commit mass murder in order to crush any dissent in their philosophy. However, while men of flesh and blood like Zendor can be killed, an idea never truly dies, and the actions by these Jedi during this period would go on to haunt the Jedi for millennia, ultimately leading to the Second Jedi Schism, which saw the rise of the Order of the Sith Lords. If you want to learn more about Zendor, the Legions of Leto, and the tragic and complex origins of the Sith, then check out this video.